Or let's unpack this. We are diving deep today into something absolutely fundamental that's, well, not just powering it, also really shaping the trajectory of the AI revolution, open source technology.
Yeah, it's a concept with a long history in tech, obviously, but its integration with artificial intelligence is bringing about some truly significant shifts.
Absolutely. And our guide for this deep dive isn't just, random stories. It's a brand new, first of its kind survey. Gives us a real snapshot of what's actually happening on the ground.
Right.
We're talking data from over 700 tech leaders and senior developers across 41 countries. Massive scale.
And the survey, it's being called the largest and most detailed analysis yet of how enterprises are thinking about, and maybe more importantly, deploying open source AI. Right now, it's a collaboration between McKinsey, the Mozilla Foundation, and the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation, which, gives it some serious weight.
Definitely. So our mission today is to take this rich source, pull out the most important nuggets for you, understand the powerful reasons organizations are jumping into open source AI, look head on at the challenges, and, get a clear picture of where this whole landscape is heading. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
All right. First things first. Is open source AI still just for hobbyists or research labs, or is it mainstream in the enterprise? The survey data seems pretty clear on this one.
Oh, it really is. The big headline here: open source AI is not some niche idea anymore. It's already widely integrated into enterprise tech stacks.
Widely? How widely?
The survey found that more than 50%, over half of the respondents, are leveraging open source in each of the core areas: data, the models themselves, and the tools. That's significant adoption across the board.
Wow, more than half in each key area. So who's leading this? Are there specific industries, maybe certain types of developers pushing this adoption?
Yeah, the data points to a few things. Industries like technology, media, and telecom, the TMT sector, they're way out front. About 70% reporting usage there.
70%, okay.
And here's something really interesting, especially if you're building an AI team. Experienced AI developers, they are significantly more likely to embrace open source. The survey found them 40% more likely to use it.
40% more likely. That suggests it's not just a tech choice, right? It's tied to maybe expertise, developer satisfaction even.
Exactly. That's a powerful insight for, hiring and keeping your talent happy.
That makes a lot of sense. Experience brings comfort with that flexibility, the transparency you get with open source.
What about the actual tools and models? Are we talking obscure stuff or names people will recognize?
Oh, definitely names you'll recognize. On the tool side, the report mentions things like PyTorch and TensorFlow foundational libraries, right? For building and training models.
Yeah, the big ones. And LangChain, too, which helps sort of orchestrate complex interactions. For the models themselves, organizations are using families from major players. Think Meta's Llama family, Google's Gemma family.
Okay, so household names and AI.
Absolutely. And models like Mistral and Microsoft's Phi also popped up as popular choices.
So it's not just niche projects. We're talking tools and models backed by some of the biggest tech companies out there. Okay, that establishes that it's widespread and who's using it. So the next big question is, why? What's the draw? What's pulling organizations and developers towards open source AI?
Well, first off, the people using it seem pretty happy. The survey found about 10 times more respondents reported being satisfied with their open source AI models than dissatisfied.
10 times more satisfied. That's a huge endorsement. What's driving that satisfaction specifically?
The top reasons they gave were performance and ease of use, which is interesting, right? Because these tools can be complex, so finding them easy to work with is a massive plus.
Performance and ease of use. Okay. And what about cost? Open source often has that reputation for being, cheaper. Does the survey back that up for AI?
It does seem to, particularly on the initial setup and the ongoing management side. 60% agreed that open source AI has lower implementation costs.
6%. Okay.
And 46% said it has lower maintenance costs compared to proprietary tools.
So cheaper to get started and cheaper to keep running, potentially.
That's what the numbers suggest. The survey showed open source had a slight edge in overall cost savings, averaging about 4% higher savings than proprietary.
Just 4% overall.
On average, yeah. But users reported a typical cost improvement of 26%, which is pretty substantial. And interestingly, marketing specifically saw even higher savings with open source 5% more than proprietary.
Okay, so cost looks like a definite advantage. But what about speed? Time to value. Is it faster to actually get something useful out of open source AI?
This is where there's a bit of a trade-off in the perception. While open source seems to win on cost, Proprietary tools were seen by almost half, 48%, as having a faster time to value.
Right. So organizations are sort of weighing those cost savings against maybe getting something deployed a bit quicker with a proprietary solution.
Exactly. It's that classic speed versus cost decision, isn't it?
Yeah, it always comes down to that. You mentioned developers earlier. How important is open source specifically to them, to the people actually building this stuff?
Oh, it's crucial. Developers heavily value open source experience. A huge majority, 81%, said experience with open source tools is highly valued in their field.
81%.
And it's not just career value. 66%, two-thirds, said working with open source tools is important or very important to their actual job satisfaction.
So it makes them happier at work?
Yeah.
That's it. That's a big deal for keeping talent. Ties back to that experience finding too, right? Experienced devs are more likely to use it, and it makes them happier.
It really does. And what's fascinating is how this all connects to maybe a broader vision for AI. The report includes this really powerful quote from Vilas S. Starr at the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation.
Oh, yeah? What did he have?
He said, "By democratizing access to innovation ecosystems, open source puts the tools of creation into everyone's hands, not just those with the deepest pockets. This transforms users into builders and consumers into creators. The future of AI belongs to ecosystems, not empires."
Ecosystems, not empires.
Yeah.
I like that. That really captures that idea of a more collaborative, distributed future for AI, not just controlled by a few big players.
Precisely.
Okay, so organizations, developers, they're finding real value, cost, satisfaction, even if there's that speed trade-off. Let's dig a bit deeper into the tech side. The report talks about the AI tech stack. Can you break that down quickly?
Sure. The AI tech stack is just, well, all the different technology bits you need to build and deploy AI. Think of it in layers. You've got the data.
Right, the raw material.
Then the AI models themselves, where those models live. The hosting, the tools you use to manage and run it all. And finally, the applications people actually use.
Got it. And the survey tells us where open source is showing up most in that stack.
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, the highest usage, all over 50%, is in data, models, and tools. That's where organizations seem most comfortable using open source options right now.
Okay. And the report also mentioned that open source models isn't just one thing, right? There's like a spectrum.
Exactly. It's not just black and white, open or closed. It's more nuanced. The spectrum goes from totally closed models, maybe you only interact via an API, don't know what's inside.
Like some of the big commercial ones.
Right. All the way up to models that actually exceed the standard definition of open source.
So what are the key points along that spectrum? What should people know?
Well, you have fully closed. Then maybe models you can access via API, but the weights, the code, it's all proprietary. Think GPT-4, perhaps. Then there's this really important category called partially open model.
Partially open.
Yeah, these usually have open weights, meaning you can download the model's core parameters, maybe run it yourself. But the code or the data used to train it might not be fully public, or the license might not be strictly OSI-approved open source.
Okay, so like the Llama models, Gemma, those fall in there.
Exactly. Llama 3, Llama 4, Stable Diffusion 2, they're often cited examples of this partially open or open weights category. Then you have models that do meet the OSI definition, like Bloom, where the code's public with permissive licenses. And then some go even further, sharing the training data too, like Pythia or T5.
That's a useful breakdown. And where are companies actually putting these models into production? Which type are they choosing most often?
The survey found that those partially open models, the ones with open weights, even if not fully OSI compliant, they're the most frequently selected for production use right now.
Interesting. So just having the weights available seems to be a big driver for practical use today.
It really reflects the current landscape. A lot of the high-performance, easily accessible models fit into that category.
Makes sense. What about hosting? Where do these models run? Does open source change how companies think about that?
It definitely seems to. The survey showed 40% of enterprise leaders specifically prefer self-hosting these open weights models on their own infrastructure.
40% self-hosting?
Yeah.
Well, why? What's the advantage there?
The main reason given was greater control over data privacy and security.
Ah, okay. Keep it in-house.
Exactly. Keep the models, keep the sensitive data close, apply your own security rules, less reliance on third-party providers. That's a big contrast to closed models, which are often only available via APIs managed by the vendor, right?
Right. So for closed models via API, maybe it feels easier to access initially.
Yeah, the survey kind of hinted at that. For models hosted by providers or accessed via API, more people found closed models easier to access and run. around 45% and 39% respectively, probably leveraging existing cloud setups.
So it really shows the choice isn't just open versus closed. It's also about deployment, control.
Exactly. It's about how you want to manage it.
This really doesn't sound like a simple switch, from proprietary to open source. It feels much more mixed.
It absolutely is. The overwhelming reality the survey points to is a hybrid one. Nearly 3/4 of respondents, over 70%, they're open to using a mix. Open source and proprietary solutions across their stack.
So not either, it's more like best tool for the job.
Precisely. Lorena Yee from McKinsey made a great comparison. She suggested it's evolving similarly to how many large organizations use solutions from multiple cloud service providers.
Like multi-cloud. Pick and choose based on need.
You got it. Strategically picking the best tool or model for each specific part of your AI system, whether it happens to be open or proprietary.
That makes a lot of sense. How do the leaders, the executives, feel about this? Are they pushing one way or the other generally?
Well, according to the survey, leaders are actually quite divided. It's almost an even split. 32% prefer proprietary, 32% have no strong preference either way, and 29% prefer open source.
Really? Pretty evenly split. What are the reasons when they do have a preference?
When they lean towards open source, the number one reason is cost. 63% cited cost.
Okay, no surprise there.
And when they lean towards proprietary, it's overwhelmingly about security, risk management, and having control over the system. 72% cited that.
So cost driving the open source preference, security and control driving the proprietary preference. Sounds like those are the big factors when comparing any AI tool, really.
They absolutely are. The survey confirmed it. Overall, when evaluating AI tools, 56% cited security and risk as key considerations, and 47% cited cost. Those are top of mind.
All right, so we've got widespread use, clear value drivers like cost and developer happiness, this nuanced view of the tech stack and model openness, and a strong trend towards hybrid approaches.
Mm-hmm.
But innovation like this always comes with challenges, right? The survey definitely points out some perceived risks.
It certainly does. While the value proposition is clear, organizations do see open source AI tools as, well, riskier than proprietary ones in some key areas.
What are the main worries? What's keeping people up at night?
Cybersecurity is number one. 62% flagged that. Regulatory compliance is a concern for 54%. And intellectual property risks for 50%. These are pretty significant concerns for any enterprise, especially with sensitive data and regulations.
Yeah, those are big ones. Do these feelings about risk change much depending on, say, where a company is or how much AI experience they have?
Yes, and yes. Geographically, there are variations. For instance, respondents in Brazil were about 10% more likely than average to see cybersecurity as a major risk. India showed higher concern about regulatory compliance and IP issues. But here's what I found really interesting. Experience level makes a huge difference.
How so?
The more experienced AI developers, the ones who've worked on multiple production systems, they perceive significantly less risk across the board.
Less risk. Interesting.
Yeah, they're about 15% less likely than less experienced devs to see cybersecurity as riskier with open source, and around 11% less likely to see higher risk for IP or regulatory compliance.
That's a really powerful finding. It suggests maybe that experience gives them the confidence or the knowledge on how to manage those risks effectively.
That seems very likely. It's not just about building, it's about knowing how to navigate the potential pitfalls and put safeguards in place.
Okay, speaking of safeguards, what are the organizations that are using open source AI actually doing about these risks? Are they just ignoring them?
No, definitely not ignoring them. The survey shows they're actively putting mitigation strategies into practice. Things like strengthening their overall information security frameworks, putting tighter software supply chain controls in place.
Supply chain controls?
Yeah.
Like knowing what's in the software.
Exactly. And doing third-party evaluations of the models they use, implementing guardrails to limit what the models can say or do.
Guardrails. Can you give some examples of these things from the report?
Sure. For guardrails, they mention tools like Meta's Llama Guard, NVIDIA's NeMo guardrails, basically filters or systems to keep model outputs safe and on topic. For third-party evaluations, think standardized benchmarks, maybe even private testing firms assessing model safety and performance.
Okay.
For documentation and monitoring, they talked about using things like software bill of materials, SBOM, it's like an ingredients list for your software, helps track vulnerabilities, and using frameworks like CVSS to score how severe security flaws are.
Right, like a standard rating system.
Yeah. And on the cybersecurity practices front, they're looking at techniques like trusted execution environments, TEAS, secure hardware zones, differential privacy, federated learning, ways to train models without exposing raw sensitive data, and of course, good old-fashioned robust access controls.
There's a whole toolkit. Technical measures, process improvements, careful evaluation. What about the organizations that haven't jumped into open source AI yet? What's holding them back?
Well, for the non-users, the top barriers line up almost perfectly with those perceived risks we just talked about. Security and compliance concerns. Biggest barrier, 56%.
Okay.
Uncertainty about long-term support for open source projects, will it still be maintained? That was a factor for 45%. And intellectual property risks were cited by 40%.
But the risks feel very real, especially if you're not already using it. But the takeaway seems to be that the organizations using it are actively managing those risks.
That's right. The report notes that among users, for example, almost half, 47%, are using safeguard models. 49% are adjusting prompts carefully to mitigate risks. And if they're worried about risks during model training, 49% consult legal counsel, 57% have specific technical safeguards and tests.
So adoption isn't happening restlessly. It's often paired with pretty careful risk management.
Exactly. Philip Reiner from the Institute for Security and Technology had a good point on this. He basically said organizations need to return to first principles, focus on basic cybersecurity hygiene first when dealing with AI.
Get the basics right.
Yeah. And also be aware of risks from, say, poorly maintained or outdated open source components, and the need for dedicated teams, QA roles, to manage all this effectively.
Basic cyber hygiene first, then the AI-specific stuff. Sounds practical. Okay, so we've covered the widespread use, the value drivers, the tech stack nuances, the hybrid reality, and these risks and how people are mitigating them. What does this survey tell us about the future? Where's this headed?
The outlook looks incredibly strong for more growth. 3/4 of respondents, 75%, expect their organizations to increase their use of open source AI tech over the next few years.
75% expect to increase usage. That's huge momentum. And given everything we've discussed, what's the likely path forward for most organizations?
The data points overwhelmingly towards that hybrid approach really becoming the standard, strategically mixing open source and proprietary technologies across the AI stack, using the strengths of each where it makes sense.
Makes sense. How does this open source adoption affect, the actual development of new AI models? Does it speed things up, change the direction?
Oh, it definitely seems to accelerate innovation, just through collaboration, right? Developers worldwide can build on each other's work. Harrison Chase, the co-founder of LangChain, he's quoted saying, "Open source tools build up an ecosystem of integrations, which allows faster innovation through shared contributions."
So it creates a bigger pie, essentially.
Yeah, and he also made the point that as more developers use open source frameworks, it naturally increases the use of commercial tools as well. So open source can actually fuel the entire ecosystem, not just compete within it.
That's a great point. It's not just an alternative. It can be an engine for the whole field, commercial side included.
Yeah.
Are there specific trends that open source is really enabling or pushing forward right now?
Yeah, the report highlights a couple of key ones. First is the rise of small language models, SLMs.
Smaller models, why are those important?
Well, they're smaller, more efficient versions derived from the big ones. They're useful for privacy-focused stuff running directly on, your phone or edge devices, or for very specialized tasks where you don't need a giant general-purpose model. Open source is playing a huge role here. Think Qualcomm AI Hub for edge devices, Llama for running models on your own computer.
Okay, smaller, specialized, local deployment. What's the second big trend?
The emergence of reasoning models. These are models designed to use more compute power during inference, the thinking part, not just during training. The goal is to get better at complex tasks, things that need logical steps or deeper understanding.
Making them smarter at problem solving.
Basically, yeah. And while some early ones were proprietary, open source alternatives like DeepSeek R1, models from Alibaba, they've popped up quickly. And projects like Perplexity and Hugging Face's Small Agents are actively building on these open models, creating new capabilities.
So open source isn't just making existing models available, it's pushing the frontier on new types of models, like better reasoners.
Exactly. And of course, all this innovation, building new models, deploying existing ones, it needs skilled people. The report really drives home that experienced developers are absolutely crucial, both as users and potential contributors. Upskilling teams is essential to really leverage all this.
Right. You need the talent to make use of the tools. But despite all this positive momentum, there was one stat in there that really jumped out at me. something potentially challenging for the long-term health of this whole open source thing.
Ah, yeah. I know the one you mean. It's pretty striking. Despite how much everyone's using it, how much value they're getting, the contribution rate back to open source projects, it's reported as quite low among these respondents.
Oh, low.
Only 13% said they've actually contributed code or resources back to open source AI projects, and half were unsure about participating in the future.
Only 13% are contributing back. Wow. That feels really low, given how fundamental open source seems to be becoming.
It does raise some questions, doesn't it, about, the long-term sustainability, the dynamism of the ecosystem, if consumption way outpaces contribution. The report mentioned that when contributions do happen, the reasons given are often things like talent attraction or brand perception for the company.
So maybe more about organizational benefit than pure collaborative spirit?
It could suggest that potentially limiting broader participation, it's mainly driven by those factors rather than, say, the core ideals of open source development.
Right. So the picture we're getting is organizations are heavily using open source AI. They see the benefits. They plan to use more, but only a small fraction are actively feeding back into the community that builds and maintains these crucial tools.
This seems to be the snapshot from this survey, yeah.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We've seen pretty clearly open source AI. It's a major force in the enterprise. Not fringe at all. It's embedded right across the tech stack.
Yeah, and organizations are finding real, tangible value, especially cost savings, keeping developers happy and engaged, even while acknowledging proprietary might sometimes be faster out of the gate.
And critically, those risks, security, compliance, IP, they're recognized, but the companies using open source, they're actively building in safeguards, technical fixes, process changes. It's not blind adoption.
Absolutely. Calculated, managed adoption. And the path forward looks undeniably hybrid, mixing and matching open and proprietary like we saw with the cloud.
And this open approach is genuinely speeding up innovation, pushing forward things like smaller, specialized models and these more capable reasoning models.
Indeed. That collaborative potential is really driving the field in exciting directions.
So here's a final thought for you, our listener, to maybe chew on. Building on that low contribution stat. Given the huge value every one organization's individuals is getting from open source AI, the cost savings, the happy developers, the faster innovation, that whole ecosystem is not Empire's idea. And yet, only 13% reported contributing back. How can the community, the companies, the individuals benefiting so much help fuel this collaborative future they seem to really want, instead of just, consuming? Or maybe, what does this low contribution rate actually mean for the long-term health and energy of the open source AI ecosystem itself? It feels like a really fundamental tension point that everyone involved in AI today probably needs to think about.